Welcome Home, a podcast for veterans, about veterans by veterans, is a project of Willing Warriors and the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run.
Good morning. I'm Larry Ziliaks, your host, Director of Culinary Services here at the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run. And today our guest is Melissa Comeau. She is Director of the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network for the Red Cross. So we're really excited to have her on the show today and to talk a little bit about her background and the program itself. So much of what the Red Cross does is unfamiliar to a lot of people. They tend to know mostly about disaster relief, but there's a lot of programs that the Red Cross has that can benefit a lot of military and veterans. So, Melissa, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Larry. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for the opportunity to highlight my favorite part of the Red Cross, which is our Military and Veteran Caregiver Network. It is part of our greater service to the armed forces. And you did mention, most people think of the Red Cross as far as disaster relief, maybe blood, maybe getting trained in CPR. But service to the armed forces is really where we get our start. Thinking back to Clara Barton, who I always call out as our angel on the battlefield, we really started as an organization serving those who were injured in service. And so the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network is just a really modern way of what we're doing, honoring the work, the legacy, the leadership of Clara Barton. And so myself, I am a proud military spouse and caregiver. My husband is a combat wounded Marine, and I've been his caregiver now for a little over a decade. So this work is so personal to me. I'm so passionate about it. I love getting to connect caregivers with the support that they need, but more importantly, with each other. And that's what the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network is all about. We are a best in practice peer support network for caregivers of all eras, all stages of life, all relationships, across all locations. We are the Red Cross, so we are there. We're in your community. We are online 24/7. We really want to meet these caregivers where they are and provide them the type of support that they need.
The program itself, where are you based out of? Are you in the Washington, D.C. area where the headquarters is?
So yes, I am a national headquarters employee. Our program sits at the national level. California, I'm actually right off of Camp Pendleton in Southern California.
Okay. Is most of the work that you all do online, or are there groups that meet and services available in person?
So for the most part, all of our programs are online, and that is by design. Oftentimes, our caregivers are homebound due to the needs of their care recipient, or they're in hospital settings, or they're, have young children at home. And so we wanted to build support that could beam into their homes and really capture them and get them where they're most comfortable. So largely all of our programs and services are online. We do have community-based groups where what we'll do is the Red Cross will train a caregiver peer group facilitator who will then get evidence-based training on our 2 programs for peer support. We use the reciprocal peer support model, which is out of Rutgers University, as well as the companioning model, which is Dr. Alan Wolfelt's out of the Center for Loss and Life Transitions in Colorado. And we've blended these 2 programs because of their meaningfulness to our caregivers. It's very heart-centric. It's very human. It's very real. And it meets you no matter where you are on your caregiver journey. So if maybe today's the day you got a diagnosis for your loved one and you are just starting out, you have no idea what to do. You're researching a condition, a disease, a diagnosis, or maybe you've been caring for your loved one for the past 30 years and you need a break and you need to know that there are other people experiencing the highs and lows of caregiving. And so we really design programs to meet people where they are. And so while we do have some in the community, largely and most popularly are online and, cell phone, you can call in for peer support. You can text in for peer support. We have an online community that operates 24/7. It has over 50 topic groups. We have about 25 different partners in there. So it's not just a network of caregivers, it's also a network of organizations that support caregivers.
Mm-hmm. So if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about your own personal journey, how it started? So your husband's a Marine and he becomes combat injured. That's the start. And what was it like for you? I'm sure our listeners are just fascinated with the process and what happens when one day things are normal and the next they're not. And you're sort of thrown into this world that unless you're a healthcare worker, you have no understanding of. But if you could, can you give us a little bit of idea what that was like for you?
Yeah, Larry, thank you so much for asking. So my story is a little different, but a little the same. Caregivers sometimes have that one injury, that call they get, and boom, they know they're going to be a caregiver, or they know they're in for some, time in a medical center for some time.
Mm-hmm.
My husband's injuries came on gradually. So he has a traumatic brain injury and he has post-traumatic stress disorder. When he came back from I would say his fifth deployment, I really noticed things were different with him.
Mm.
And so he was forgetting things. He was maybe a little more angry. He was avoidant, very easily startled. And I'm very lucky in that my husband went and he noticed it in himself as well.
Mm.
So he went to his medical team there. This was back in when we were stationed in 29 Palms. And he had a full evaluation and said, something's not right. And they said, okay, yeah, no, you would have what we would call PTSD. And so he did an intensive outpatient treatment for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we thought we had cured everything, right? It was 12 weeks. He did all the appointments. We then PCS'd. We moved to Camp Pendleton, where he was going to be a part of SOTG. And then when he was there, things weren't fixed. It wasn't better. And it was at this time that he was transferred to the Wounded Warrior Battalion in Camp Pendleton because of the post-traumatic stress disorder and the moderate TBI that they found.
Mm-hmm.
So that started about a 9-month journey in and out of hospitals, in and out of inpatient, outpatient treatments. I was doing all of this as his wife. I didn't even know what a caregiver was. I mean, I thought, caregivers are what your grandparents have. Until one day I'm sitting there at the hospital in Camp Pendleton and a nurse comes out and says, "Oh, are you Stephen's caregiver?" And I was like, no, I'm his wife. And I was kind of taken. I'm like, I'm young. My husband's young. And this very kind nurse, and I wish I remembered her because I tell this story all the time. And she really gave me such a gift in calling me his caregiver. Because before that, I was just his wife. And you can look for resources and you can, I had military spouse support. But what I really needed was caregiver support, understanding what that journey is like to walk with someone with complex medical needs that ultimately led to his medical retirement. And so this sweet woman turned to me and said, I'm like, oh, I'm young. I'm just his wife. And she's like, you're probably both. Mm-hmm. And then that night I went and I Googled caregiver and then military caregiver. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of things available. I mean, I found a Facebook group and I found, some pamphlets and some studies that had been done on military caregivers, but there wasn't a community. There wasn't a place I could go and find a lot of resources about mental health caregiving and, medical retirement. What does that look like? And then, getting into the VA system. How can I get help with that? And so I had early on thought that I wanted to build something that I didn't have. And that was ultimately what became the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network.
So our listeners know you started this and you're the person responsible for what today is a program incorporated into the Red Cross. And they saw this and they said, this is so good, we want this. But
yes, Larry.
I think you need to take the credit for this. This is an amazing program, and without you, it just wouldn't exist.
Oh, well, that's very generous. And while I am honored to be a part of the team that started MVCN, I was hired in December of 2014. So coming up on 10 years. And I was just going to be a peer supporter in an online community. And the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network actually was a program started from TAPS, which you might know, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors.
Sure.
And Dr. Linda Davis and Bonnie Carroll at TAPS understood that there was a lot of grief and a lot of loss that goes into caregiving. And we got to learn from their, at the time, 25 years of best practice peer support in the survivor space, right? Dealing with our Gold Star families, those who have lost a loved one due to service. And then change the scope to those who are actively caring for our wounded, ill, injured, and aging service members. And so it has been an honor of my life to learn from these women, from the networks that have been built to support people at some of the hardest times in their life, and then to be able to carry it forward. And back in 2017, the Red Cross saw the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network, saw what we were doing for a very specific group of military connected communities, and they wanted it. So in April of 2017, we became part of the Red Cross. And at that time, I stepped into the director role. So I have led it forward from 2017 to what it is today.
And so you're in the hospital and a light bulb goes off and you start to realize, yes, I'm the wife, but I'm also the caregiver. And you then start to locate resources to help yourself and your veteran. Do you remember the time when you were able to take those resources and help somebody else?
It was almost right away. So I, again, reaching out, and a lot of it at that time, I was really focused on my husband, right? He was going through the medical treatment. At the time, we also had our son was only 3 years old. So really in that mommy mode as well, really trying to take care of both of them. But someone had given me, it was through my husband, he had gotten a backpack from the Wounded Warrior Project when he was in the hospital. And in there, someone said, hey, they have family support people, like they help the family as well. And so I was like, oh, that's awesome. And inside that backpack that my husband got, there was it was a card or something that said, hey, this is a resource for families or family support people. That's what they called them. And so I had that card and I made a bunch of copies of it. And then anytime I was at the hospital and I would see other people, I would be like, hey, I don't know if you've heard, but this program helps families. So if you need, a resource for, mental health, or if you need a resource for, transportation, there were all kinds of things they were doing at the time. And so I had that photocopied flyer. And then, someone caught me doing that, and they gave me a California veterans resource book, like a little benefit guide. It was like a book, and they gave me a whole box of those. And so I started passing those out. And then I wanted to reach more people, right? Because Camp Pendleton Wounded Warrior Battalion is a small community. There was a lot of people there at the time. But I knew this was happening at Army bases, and I knew this was happening at different VA hospitals all over the country. And I knew different bases were having this, where families didn't know that what they were doing was called caregiving, and that really there was support for them. And, even if there wasn't support for them, there was at least another person they could relate to or talk to or understand, validate their experience. And so, early days, it was on Facebook. We would chat through different groups. I was very honored to receive a fellowship with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation.
Oh, yeah.
And so through that work, I got to lobby in Congress on issues related to caregivers. I got to introduce the Hidden Heroes Congressional Caucus for military caregivers. And I have remained close to that organization as well through different advocacy efforts, and just my love and admiration for Senator Elizabeth Dole, who really, when she saw caregivers in Walter Reed, these young families, she knew she had to do something. And that was the birth of the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. So I've been so grateful to be connected to them as well.
Talk a little bit about, I know when we opened the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run and we started to invite wounded warriors and their families out for a stay, I used to think, when a soldier was wounded, the family would come and be with that warrior at the hospital, mom, dad, wife, and that everything would focus on the warrior, and everything was directed, all the energy, everything was directed towards getting the warrior better. But I come to realize pretty quickly that that's really not what happens, that families have all the problems that they've always had. This is just an extra problem. This is not the problem. This is just the next of all the family problems that we have. Remarkably, we have had two families that have stayed with us that had adult children killed through gun violence. And this was on top of having to deal with care for a wounded warrior. So I've got to believe that you see this all the time, that you see that the people that need the support, part of why they need the support is because they have all the problems that every family does, but they're just becoming overwhelmed by the burden. I don't want to call it a burden, but, well, it is kind of a burden that the military puts on caregivers and non-medical attendants, because being in that hospital system, in that healthcare system, is not easy. But you must see this frequently.
Yes, Larry. And I think, I don't ever use the word burden. It's a medical word. Did you know that? Like, that's the term the medical community puts on it. But you're the first person I've ever had ask me that question about, hey, isn't life happening anyway? You have job loss, you have aging parents, you have a kid that perhaps loses their life to gun violence, you lose jobs, you have cars break down, you have your house burned down. There are all kinds of things that go along. Life doesn't stop because you have a wounded warrior.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're the first person who's ever kind of recognized that and asked that question. And I would say that's a lot of the reason why the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network exists. It is because of all of the rest of life that has to go on, must go on. You're still a mom, you're still a parent, you're still a sister, you're still an employee. There's a lot of rich life that goes around the care and love of your, wounded warrior. So we definitely have to lean into these families and make sure they're taken care of. The RAND study that came out in 2014, America's Hidden Heroes, America's Military Caregivers, found that a well-supported caregiver was one of the best indicators for the health outcomes of the person they're caring for. Meaning, if you care for the veteran, you by proxy are caring for that veteran. They'll have better health outcomes as the veteran if you take care of their caregiver. And so a lot of us have really tried to amplify that, a well-supported caregiver. What does that mean? Well, perhaps they have a flexible employment opportunity, which helps with a lot of things. They have ongoing respite. The care needs of not only the veteran that they're caring for, but they're going to their own, yearly checkups. They're getting their own health care as well. There's investment in the family, the recreation, the chance to reconnect. You mentioned a retreat. Those are invaluable to families that have maybe been stressed for so long. They just need that time to reconnect. They need a little break, and they need that loving, supportive environment to do it. So really that focus on the rest of life, it matters. It matters directly to the wounded warrior, the veteran, whoever it is in that family that's receiving care. They benefit from the love and care provided to their family, from organizations, from peers, from the military, from the VA. It all matters.
Let's talk a little bit about the webpage. And I really like it because it's not the easiest thing to find. I'll grant you that, because it's kind of buried a little bit deep in the Red Cross group of web pages, but it's redcross.org, and then get help and military families, and then services for veterans. So the way I found it was I Googled Red Cross and Military Veteran Caregiver Network and went right to it. Two, you can drill down on the just redcross.org page, or I'm going to link to it in the show notes, so it'll be easy to find that way. Once you're there, there's a couple of things I want listeners to pay attention to. Number one, is on the right side. You'll see a red button that says Donate Now. Go ahead and hit that and donate to this program and the Red Cross in general. Whenever there's a hurricane or just some sort of natural disaster, I see all of these ways to donate and give, GoFundMe, this and that. Don't pay any attention to that nonsense. Half of those people are probably trying to rip people off. Just go to the Red Cross webpage and donate. They provide amazing services, and they are great stewards of your donation, for sure. There's a calendar on here which you can go to and see all the different programs that are available for once you join. And it's easy to join. You could just click on Join Now, and I imagine you'll get on a mailing list, and then you just will learn about more resources. Does anybody contact the caregiver directly?
Yes. So thank you so much, Larry. Yes. When you go to our website, which I also have a vanity URL for it. So if you just go to www.redcross.org/caregivers, it'll bring you right to my page. We do have a huge website, so I like to give people that shortcut every time I can. So www.redcross.org/caregivers brings you right to our Military and Veteran Caregiver Network page. And from there, you can join our network. So if you put in your name, your email, and your zip code, you'll get an email back from us, and we're going to want a verification document. Because we are working with military and veteran connected communities, we do want to verify your military affiliation. There is no one form that proves you are a military or veteran caregiver. So we use a lot of different things to verify people. Oftentimes we see DD-214s, line of duty documentation, wounded warrior battalion order, wounded transition unit orders, and often we see a lot of VA caregiver letters. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have none of those, you don't know what I'm talking about, because maybe your loved one served 30 years ago and none of those words make any sense to you. You can reach out to a real person. So myself and the two other staff on our team, we are all caregivers. We are all military caregivers. And so we can have a conversation with someone, help them get their verification, and get them added to our secure caregiver-only online community. Then that calendar you mentioned, we have every month you'll see a calendar of events. There'll be peer support events, educational opportunities. We highlight our partners if they're hosting an event that we think caregivers will be interested in. And right on that calendar, you can click and register and get all of the information. Another great feature of our website is our Hero Care Resource Directory. Now, if you go just below the Join Now, you'll see resources, and you just type in your zip code and a keyword. So maybe you're interested in financial assistance. It's been a big issue for many of our families. Mm-hmm. And maybe you don't want to talk to a case manager. Sometimes there's stigma attached to reaching out for certain types of help. Well, right from our website, you could enter in financial assistance and your zip code, and it will take you right to the resources that are serving your very community. And maybe you want to see what else is available in your community. Well, this resource directory has at least 800 resources for every zip code in America. Mm-hmm. And you can search by era of service. You can search by different diagnosis. You can search by different filters. Maybe you need care. Maybe you need food. Maybe you need transportation. I can just spend hours in our resource directory, and I have. So if I'm helping a caregiver, say in Biloxi. I don't know the Biloxi resources like the back of my hand, but I can go to this resource directory and I can find resources that can help them right in the zip code they live in. And so that resource directory is worth its weight in gold. And we hear time and time again from our caregivers that maybe they were embarrassed to ask for help, or they needed help with something they felt a stigma attached to. And that is gone away because you can do this anonymously. You don't have to tell us who you are. You can just go in there, you can see what's available, and hopefully leverage the resources that are going to help you when you need them the most.
I can guarantee that these resources are extremely valuable, because I'm looking at the URL for the search results, and it's herocare.auntbertha.com. And so I don't know who Aunt Bertha is, but I just picture this little old lady with glasses just typing out these resources for us. It's just great.
Yes.
It's it's just such a useful webpage. And I really encourage anybody who's a caregiver who's listening, or if you know a family where the veteran is struggling or is having problems and the family really doesn't know what's going on or isn't sure where to get help, or the veteran just doesn't want to deal with the VA because of all the hassle and stories they've heard and this and that, reach out to the Red Cross Caregiver Network, join, figure out what resources are going to work for you and be the most valuable. And I would say join these peer groups, listen and learn from people who have walked this path before. You're not alone. They are going to be able to help you navigate the system, know what to expect, set your expectations properly, where to get help. Also, they've just done it. They've just done it before. And that experience is just invaluable. As you personally know, you're kind of thrown into it. You got to fend for yourself. Why reinvent the wheel? It's all right here for you at the Red Cross Military and Veteran Caregiver Network. So, Melissa, before we go, what's the one thing, the most important thing that you think our listeners should know about the Red Cross Military Veteran Caregiver Network?
We will care for you. We care for the caregiver. And everything that the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network does comes from the personal experience of military and veteran caregivers. So our team affectionately says it's a network of caregivers by caregivers. And although we have an amazing team, our staff and our volunteers, it really is the caregivers that come and support each other, that celebrate the wins, that mourn the losses, that make our network what it is. One of my favorite things is, caregivers come to us and they keep asking, when does it get easier? When does it get better? And it might never get easier and it might never get better. But I guarantee being a member of a peer support group makes you stronger. It makes the caregiver stronger, which makes all of those battles, all of those challenges that much easier. And then, of course, you always have a network of people to catch you on the tough days and cheer for you on the good days.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to help us better understand this particular program of the Red Cross. You guys just do amazing work. And I just can't say enough about the organization. Every time I've interacted with anybody from the Red Cross, and we're part of the Northern Virginia Veteran Collaborative and the Northern Virginia Veteran Suicide Coalition, it's just a world-class organization. The people that are there, whether they're responding to a house fire in your neighborhood, whether they're responding to a hurricane or some natural disaster, whether they're picking up the phone, whether they're drawing your blood, it doesn't matter. They're all just amazing volunteers and staff, and we just can't say enough about them. So thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry. And I should say that March is Red Cross Month. And so from one proud Red Crosser, thank you for all of the things that you do. Thank you for sharing about the Red Cross. It really is the honor of my life to get to work for this organization and connect with wonderful people like you doing amazing work in your communities. So thank you.
So that does it for this episode. Our listeners know that we'll drop another one next Monday at 5 a.m. If you like to get up early and listen to podcasts, there'll be one waiting for you. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can reach us at podcast@willingwarriors.org. Until then, thanks for listening.
The Welcome Home podcast is brought to you by Willing Warriors, a nonprofit organization serving active duty service members and veterans since 2012. To learn more, please visit our webpage at willingwarriors.org.